Hi, this is Betty Plugs Books, and today I want to talk about what method I use for deciding whether or not to buy a book. I used to be very much an impulse shopper when it came to buying books. I would go to the bookstore, I would just see a cover I liked, and I would buy it. And this wasn't the worst thing in the world when I had a well-paying job and disposable income and not really a lot of financial goals or responsibilities. But eventually I decided I want to do things like pay down my debt and buy a house and not spend every cent that I earned after I paid for necessities on things like books or going out to eat. I decided that I should save some of that. So I had to change my book buying habits because I was probably spending an embarrassing amount on books every month. I don't have the exact numbers because I did not want to track that when I was doing it. I'm sorry, my cat is being really clingy today. As I started making a plan to save more of my money and pay off more of my debts, I started spending a lot less money on books. And that's not to say that I spent no money on books. I did go on a book buying ban for myself for a while, but now I'm just not that inclined to buy very many books unless they fall into one of a few categories. The first is books that I've actually already read, but that I liked enough to have on my bookshelf. So these are usually either 4 or 5 star rated books, or they're within a series, which as a whole I rate as 4 or 5 stars. Often they're by my favorite authors. They're usually things that either I feel like one day in the future I will want to reread, or that I love so much that I want to have the ability to let friends borrow them from me so that I can just give it to them to borrow and they can't say like, oh, I haven't checked it out from the library yet, or oh, I'm a slow reader so I won't be able to finish it before the book is due. It's just a keep it as long as you want, and then when you get to it you can finally rave with me about it or throw it in my face saying this was a horrible idea, why did you recommend this book to me, I hate you. Either way. Another reason I might buy a book is if I actually can't get it through my library. There's been the occasional book that I can't get through my library or through interlibrary loan, and sometimes it's because it was published in a different country and there's not publication in the US yet, so the libraries that the interlibrary loan system are involved with don't for some reason have that in the system in general. And so in that case, I might buy that book so that I have the ability to read it. And if the library will let me when I am done with it and I don't want it anymore, I will sometimes try to donate that back to the library. Although often when I donate a book to the library, it doesn't actually go into their library loan system. It seems to go to their library fundraising bookshop, which is still good, but I'd rather the library than have that book to loan out. But oh well. The third reason I might buy a book is if I'm wanting to read that book fairly soon for either a video or a book club that I'm in, or a readathon of some kind, or honestly, if I just know that I want to read that book right away. But ideally, this is I buy the book and then I immediately start reading it like when I get home from the store. There's no like, oh, because I feel like I really want to read this sometime soon, I'll buy it. Because when I do that, I buy it and I go home and I'm like, this will be next on my TBR, and then it never actually is. So unless I'm going to bring it home and basically start reading it right away, or I have a specific date for the book club or readathon when I'm going to start reading it, I don't buy it for that reason. And the fourth reason I might buy a book, which is the time that I am most lenient, is if I have a gift card or birthday money or gift money of some kind to buy books with. Now, often the books that I buy will fall into one of those 3 other categories anyway, but when I have this kind of thing, it's the time when I most allow myself to just do that spontaneous book buying based on cover or based on reading the summary of the book and finding it really interesting, or just because it's hyped up on BookTube or something kind of reason. But that lets me kind of have fun with it and not be so restrictive. But part of the reason that I don't usually shop that way anymore for books is because I found that so many of the books that I bought just on a whim and not based on having liked the author previously and not having been based on any particular need to read it for a particular time has made me just generally regret buying the book, and often the books that I chose based on the cover weren't books that I ended up liking. Apparently my aesthetic sense for what looks good on a book cover does not correspond to what I like within the contents of the book a lot of the time. I still think there's something that feels really special about going to a store and buying a book just based on how you feel when you look at it and look at the cover and look at the synopsis and maybe flip to the first page or two and get a sense of the reading style. There's a little bit of a thrill in that, but I'm not sure if it's any different or more justifiable than a thrill I would feel from going to Target and buying a new shirt on a whim just based on the feeling and idea and aesthetics of it at the time. Just because I have a good happy feeling from that does not necessarily make it a good financial decision That and the fact that I'm now self-employed and no longer have a consistent software engineer income to bolster my book buying frenzy. I'm also not sure that everyone needs to go about this like reducing the amount that they spend on books or the number of books that they buy. I'm in a fortunate situation where my library system is fantastic. They do interlibrary loans. The library system is huge. They usually have a new release right away when it comes out, although the wait list can be a little long for more popular books. I also have a large inherited book collection from my husband's parents, and so I'm never really at a loss for things to read. There might just be things that I want to read more than the things that are in that collection that are new that aren't part of that collection. So the fact that I have access to so many books from there and through my library, and I'll never be in a situation where I literally don't have anything new that I could read, makes it so that I'm much more able to abstain from buying books in a way that you might not be as able to and still get to read if you don't have a good library system. I also think for some people, having the books they want to read physically owned and on their TBR, their physical TBR, will make it much more likely that they'll read them, will make them get to the things that they really do want to get to sometime. It'll make that easier and more likely. Whereas for me, I found when I had a ton of unread books and like this whole size shelf was filled up with books that I hadn't read, that I had bought, that I planned to read, it really just served as a source of guilt for me. Where then I felt so much pressure to read the things that I bought that I didn't want to read at all because I couldn't read the things that I actually wanted to read. And buying that many books also often kept me from DNFing books that at the time, I didn't want to DNF anything, but I think that was mostly because I bought so many books. I didn't want to have wasted the money buying that book by then not reading it or not finishing it, so I felt a lot of guilt in that sense. So even though it was really hard for me to do to stop buying just books on a whim and having almost the process of buying books be one of my hobbies and not just reading the books, that was really hard. It took a course of several months. If I remember correctly, I had to go cold turkey for a long time and I kept messing up on going cold turkey, but over time I found that not having all of those books physically owned that I didn't plan to immediately read, that I hadn't already read and weren't part of my favorites that I wanted to just have in my collection, helped me a lot. And I also think this is great because it allows me, when I do buy books or when I do ask for books for gifts, that the money that is spent going towards books goes towards authors that I really do love and really do want to be financially supporting, rather than necessarily buying a book just from someone who's already rich and famous from writing and turns out to be kind of a trash person. I'd much rather buy my books and support some of my favorites like Seanan McGuire and mostly Seanan McGuire. Let's be honest. That's like a third of my own shelf. It's just Seanan McGuire. But I really want to hear about how the rest of you go about choosing which books to buy. Is it the main hobby that you put money into and you really don't mind buying as many books as possible, supporting as many authors as possible? You love having like a full several shelves of books owned in your personal library. Are you entirely a library reader? Are you a mix of both? Do you buy books that you've already read through the library, or do you figure that since you've read them, you don't need to own them? Please let me know in the comments or make a response to this in your own video. I would love to hear other people chat about their book buying process. Honestly, I've just been going through YouTube videos like crazy lately and I just want more content. So please make more content for me to watch. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe. I'll be making videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I think. Until next time, happy reading.